What is up, guys? It's Sunday the 14th of May, and let's get right in. There's a lot to cover, very serious stuff. Let's get right into it, because this is your tech news roundup. First up, we have some major news that you've probably heard, and I could honestly talk about this for like the entire episode, but I won't, because other stuff happened in the world of tech this week that also warrants covering, and you know, I'm going to try and keep this concise. I might make a video about exactly how it happened, and you know, once the fog has cleared. However, there is major news. On Friday, large parts of the NHS's computer system had to be shut down as they were hit by ransomware, which sounds horrible in itself, but becomes even worse when you realise it wasn't just the NHS, and it was in fact a global attack. The piece of ransomware, known as WannaDecryptor, or WannaCry for short, hit multiple countries with hundreds of thousands of computers affected. The two that were hit hardest were probably the UK and Russia, but that wasn't everything. I mean, over in the US, FedEx had major issues, and in France, Renault actually had to stop production of cars because of their computer system being down, with the Renault Formula 1 team also having issues, and they were potentially not going to be able to race today, which they luckily did. With over 150 countries affected, questions have been raised about how the hell it spread, and I have a theory, but again, I'll cover this, I might mention it briefly in a minute, but you know, we're going to stick to facts first. The WannaCry piece of ransomware had been defeated before, and luckily most of the NHS services are back up and running, and most of the places worldwide seem to be sort of fixing their stuff currently, but it does seem to have been a coincidental fix. I say fix, it's not really a fix, it was the stop of spreading, which was completely coincidental. So let me lay the scene. You're a 22-year-old security researcher, your nickname is Malware-Tech, and you've got the week off work. However, there is major news with this piece of malware spreading, so you're like, why don't I take a look? You open it up and find that for some reason it's pinging a domain address, so you decide to register it to see what happens, and the ransomware just stops spreading. Whoever created the ransomware clearly put in a kill switch, which wasn't intended on being found, but bloody hell, what an absolute coincidence. All in all, registering the domain only cost £8, meaning that that's all it costs to stop the spread. Now, this hasn't stopped the ransomware itself. If your computer is affected, it will remain affected. What it does mean, however, is that new computers won't be affected, and there is a major possibility that someone will make the slight tweaks to the code and just re-release it so it doesn't respond to that domain. However, it is a slight pause. Security researchers all around the globe are saying, and I'm going to join them in this message, which is patch all of your software, upgrade everything. Like, if there is a new update, apply it right now, because there's no reason not to. This is a major issue, and what makes it more alarming is that Microsoft actually patched the exploit that was used about a month ago. But in the case of the NHS, their systems are so out of date, they actually still run Windows XP, which was dropped like 2 years ago by Microsoft. In the case of the NHS, to be fair to them to some extent, now this doesn't excuse their behaviour, but it is worth noting that the NHS is one of the largest computer systems in the world, and its patching is neither easy, fast, nor cheap, but it is essential. In fact, if you're running the latest version of Windows 10, your computer would have been completely unaffected by it. So most likely, if you're up to date, you're completely fine. This is mostly like large computer systems that have to run software for commercial purposes and therefore aren't up to date as soon as the update is released. Europol Director Rob Wainwright was on the BBC News this morning urging all companies to patch all of their software before Monday morning, as they should. And Defence Secretary Michael Fallon has been on the Andrew Marr show to state that the NHS were given money for this. Like, it's not that they just decided not to. Fallon says that the NHS had been given roughly £50 million to improve the security of their cyber systems, as the Defence Secretary had found that one of the major issues for the UK was cyber security. It is thought that the ransomware might become worse on Monday because people will be getting back into the office. This was an issue that occurred on Friday, where relatively few people tend to work in the office. So with people going back in on Monday, we might find that there are office spaces that were infected but hadn't realised, or things like that. However, I have a theory, and I just want to put it out there because there are multiple parts to this story that I find interesting. That the ransomware had been patched previously, like people knew how to A, get around the ransomware, and B, how to stop it from being on the computer in the first place. but also there's like the fact they were only demanding £300. Like, that is a very small amount of money to demand if you're infecting someone like the NHS, which is a government organisation. Outside of that, the fact that it affected over 150 countries in a single day makes me wonder where, you know, how it spread so quickly. So I'm wondering whether, you know, it had been there for a while, perhaps there was a remote trigger, and again, this is pure speculation at this point, but what if computer systems had been affected for a year, or whatever, in theory, and all that happened was someone flicked a remote on switch to get all of those computers at once? I feel like that there must be some level of like active involvement, and with the person who spread this ransomware not expecting it to go to the NHS, FedEx, and all of these major places. The cost of the attack is unknown because there's, you know, business interruption as well as the actual cost of potentially people paying for getting their stuff decrypted and all of that jazz. So it's thought that roughly £22,000 worth of Bitcoin have been paid, but we're not sure outside of that. However, it is worth noting that no information was stolen. Now, the way that ransomware works is it sort of locks all of your information, it encrypts it all so you can't access it. But that doesn't mean that the person who can decrypt it necessarily has access to the data itself. One of the major issues when this first surfaced was the idea that people might have medical records and medical information of people that, you know, are in the NHS systems. Luckily, it's thought that that hasn't occurred and that all of the data is still under lock and key. The best way to think about it is if you imagine all of the information is in this locked box and all the hackers did was put a second box around it, so now you can't get to your stuff. Anyway, as I said, we could have done an entire video about this. We might still do, because there's just so much going on with so many people affected. So it might be worth talking about in a further video. However, we've got a lot going on next week, so it's going to have to be a few weeks out. And even then, I think it might be worth waiting a few weeks until all the smoke clears, so we really know what happened. Elsewhere, there is some deeply sad news. For me at least, there's a game that you probably have heard of called Alan Wake. Really great game. It's hard to explain this without getting really ranty. But basically, if you want to play the game, buy it like right now, and I highly recommend it. It's on Steam for like £3 or something right now. Just go do it. I'll link to it below. Buy it, play it, you'll love it, trust me. Anyway, after this weekend, it's going to be removed from all digital stores due to an expiring license for the music that's used in the game, and it means that you won't be able to buy the game anywhere. This sucks because, you know, Alan Wake is a genuinely really good, terrifying game that, again, highly suggest you go and download. You'll love it, I promise. And I think if nothing else, this highlights how I'm not sure now. I'm not a music expert. I'm not a copyright expert, but I can't help but feel like we need some form of like we really need to rein in the way our copyright system works, both in the UK and just globally. Like it's a bit much. Currently, the way the copyright system works is if I registered a copyright right now for a book character or, you know, whatever it is I register a copyright for, it would last for my entire lifetime, plus 90 years. Why plus 90 years? Because as far as the legal system is concerned, I can't make money on my product if it hasn't been around at least 90 years after my death. In fact, as ridiculous as it is for individuals, I mean, J.K. Rowling has made more money than she'll probably ever spend on the Harry Potter set of books, but it's still hers, and you can't write official, you know, fan fiction or what you can't write anything, strictly speaking, that's based on Harry Potter and still make money off it. And I think that's a bit unfair if you want to expand on a universe you really like, such as fanfiction. Anyway, the place where this gets really patchy is if you're a corporation. You see, if it's tied to me, I'm going to die eventually. If it's tied to Walt Disney, then they're going to be around for a while. I mean, can you imagine how Star Wars ever supposed to make money? They've only released like 8 movies and multiple versions of each movie. You can buy like 8 different versions of the original Star Wars on like Blu-ray and VHS and DVD and HD DVD and all of these different platforms. How are they ever going to make money on Star Wars? So yeah, that's me getting ranty. Point being, just go buy Alan Wake. It's a real shame that it's going to be taken off of all digital stores and is a weird sort of look into the future potentially if, you know, we move into this all digital world where games are removed from stores and you have no way of acquiring this game or this piece of software or whatever after 5 years and the license expires. And finally, with Google I/O next week, which is something we're going to cover in tomorrow's video with Tech Week ahead, Google have announced something unexpected before I/O. This is one of those things you'd expect them to announce at I/O. It's a pretty big deal. Google have announced that Android is going to have a major update with this thing called Project Treble. Now, for you to understand what makes this so amazing, you need to understand how Android works. Currently, the way that the vendor integration into Android works is that it's this one solid chunk, right? I have this pound coin, and it's one solid piece. If I want to update the coin, I have to update all of it, right? I have to get rid of the bit in the middle and the bit on the outside. Moving forward, though, there'd be two distinct separate pieces. We have the core, which is, you know, the way we think of like core Android, and then you have the outside piece, which is what the vendors add. What that means is if I'm Google and push an update to Android and Samsung decide that they want to put their layer on top, instead of having to upgrade all of it, you can just upgrade the core. This means that the Samsung bit stays the same, but just the core changes, and that means that you get updates much quicker. This will all be done via a vendor interface, which we don't know much about currently, but you know, that was a brief overview of how it will work, and we'll find out more probably at Google I/O, but with Android's main issue being fragmentation caused by the clunkiness of the upgrade process if you are a vendor such as Samsung, as opposed to the Nexus and the Pixel lines of phones, which just get the update straight away, we should hopefully see some level of uniformity across Android. I, for one, am for anything that gives us quicker updates, because, you know, updates are great. Who doesn't love having new features as long as the phone isn't broken by the updates? Google says the full documentation for Treble will come alongside Google O when it drops later this year, which again we're expecting to hear more about at Google I/O, along with a new beta version of Android O. But, you know, we don't know the name yet, which will also be a fun time to find out, which is most likely Oreo, but no one's quite sure yet. There's a lot going on basically in the world of Android, and it is a very exciting place. And the big thing for me at least is that device manufacturers now have no excuse when it comes to updates, because Project Treble means that their layer as such is separate from Android, and they can just update the core whenever, and it's just better for everyone. Just if you're OnePlus or Samsung or HTC or anyone and you're listening to this, please just enable Project Treble on your devices, because it'll make the whole world so much better. Anyway guys, that is it for this week. We are still in the aftermath of that massive cyber attack. So I'm going to be keeping tabs on it. If there is major news, I will make a video. If not, we'll cover it in next week's Tech News Roundup anyway, so that should be fine. If you like this video, make sure to click like, you know, that's greatly appreciated. If not, I'm not quite sure what you're doing here. However, there is good news. You can click here to see the previous video, which you'll probably really like. We've been making a load of really cool videos lately. You can click here to see the video that YouTube thinks you'll like most. Also probably really cool because YouTube thinks you'll like it. And if none of these seem like your kind of thing, just subscribe, you know, just do it. Just click the magical subscribe orb. Maybe you'll like a future video. You probably will. We're doing lots of cool stuff. We're covering an event next week, and then we're actually covering 3 over the next 4 weeks. So make sure to do that. We have lots of really cool stuff coming soon. I will see you guys next time.